I played over 700 hours of Let It Die across the PlayStation 4 and PC. I'm here to tell you that Deathverse, not even close to Let It Die, because it's a spin-off focusing on competitive multiplayer, with part of the gameplay they had before, but further refined. I enjoyed what I played from the open beta, and I'm looking forward to the full release in the future. And now, for the in-depth review. I love Suda's work. Be it a title where he worked as a director, producer, or a writer, he always had that special touch of something made with passion behind it. I'm still waiting for the re-release of Flower, Sun and Rain, or a translation of the PS2 version. Shame that we didn't get the true complete version of Killer 7, and even though I enjoyed Shadows of the Damned, I would love to see the original idea worked into a new game. At least we got a manga adaptation, which was pretty interesting. And then we have Let It Die, which in every discussion someone has to bring out its pay to win. Funny enough, I never paid a cent over my 700 hours of gameplay, and now they hate it because it's not Lily Bergamo. The fact that they put a decal of that in the game is pretty funny though. I get it, I also want to see what that was all about, but as with everything he worked in some capacity, we got what I also consider another one of his flawed gems, and I think I wouldn't have it any other way. It was a fun game with a nice aesthetic, and an amazing soundtrack composed of original and licensed music, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Hence the 700 hours. When it was first announced last year, my first ignorant reaction was that it seemed awfully similar to Let It Die. Must have been something with the animation on the characters, only to be revealed that not only it was related, but it was wearing the brand as a subtitle, drawing further connections of something that might just be of my interest. By this point I had stopped playing Let It Die for 2 or 3 years, so something new in the series was actually a surprise to see. What was curious is that just a few days early, Grasshopper Manufacture was acquired by NetEase from their previous parent company, Gung Ho, the same company that was publishing Deathverse, along with the developer Super Trick Games, led by producer on Let It Die and now director of Deathverse. Luckily, they were kind enough to eventually release a developer video where they explained how their team was built out of former Grasshopper members, continuing the support for Let It Die and develop this new title, which they were quick to point out of not being a sequel, but a spin-off in the same universe. This can be seen everywhere, as there are references to the Yotsuyama group, the so-called Heart's Rage disaster used as a point of reference in the timeline, and the funny skeleton man, Uncle Dad, is seen watching the in-game show Dead Jamboree, which the players participate in. Not like it matters, but I do wonder if any of these new elements will be referenced in the future titles that fall in the category of the so-called Sudaverse. While it still carries the style and substance of Let It Die, I do like the retro future that they decide to go with. Seems to be an aesthetic that is becoming more popular nowadays, with games like Prey, Outer Worlds, and No Man's Sky. It's like steampunk, pulp sci-fi? No, dieselpunk. Or maybe atompunk.
Why do you come?
Cyberpunk! Not just that, Akira Yamaoka is back once again to work on the soundtrack. And from what I managed to listen to, there seems to be some funky tunes.
Isn't it? Decaying objects like this can be destroyed, too. You'll find all sorts of items in rotten boxes, so let them have it.
Before getting into the gameplay itself, I just want to mention the 2 MC characters that function as announcers, commenting over the matches. I do like the designs, especially Queen Bee, but their voice just wasn't what I expected. Would have preferred something more subtle. I do remember during the release of Let It Die how people were disappointed that the player versus player component wasn't real time, with player invasions being relegated to AI controlled opponents that the other players would put in their own base for defense. Now for Deathverse, for going the roguelite action-adventure genre, they decided to merge the classic style deathmatch of competitive multiplayer with some modern sensibilities. Taking place on an arena composed of 7 small hexagons, each one gets contaminated as the match goes on, quickly pushing the players to the center until they are forced into a final showdown in a closed space, while everything else is literally deleted from existence. This is nothing new, and the Battle Royale formula is pretty much the genre of the mainstream nowadays. But with a player limit of 16 and the maps accommodating to that, the rhythm of the game is much faster and aggressive. Don't get me wrong, I do love the concept of a Battle Royale, but all of the executions until now make it this Xbox huge map, where each match takes more than 15 minutes. Most of those are trying to find the other players. while the firefights are a matter of only seconds. I hate that, and mostly prefer the flow of Deathmatch, where you are constantly engaging with other players. Deathverse has managed to create a good middle point between those two. Matches take around 8 minutes, and everything is pushing the players to hurry it up. The announcers mentioned when there wasn't been a kill for too long. The arenas get contaminated to reduce the playfield. The jackals, the hunters, are overpowered enemies that spawn for 1 minute to pursue any player that they set their eyes on. Hell, they even give you this cool Batman vision that lets you see where items and other players are instead of a certain range, but leaving you vulnerable at the same time. While on it, let's talk about maps. The open beta had 5 maps that would be chosen at random, and while in the beginning they all seemed mostly the same, after some matches I managed to start appreciating them better for the finer details. Not only in terms of aesthetic, but the construction of the maps, which allow for a nice flow of gameplay with lots of variety when considering all the skills and items available. To maintain the hostile nature of the map, there are also cryptids roaming the map, which you can kill not only to get health back, but also get items that you can reuse. These include moving decoys, bombs to destroy shields, turning invisible, and, my favorite, a spring that sends you much higher than your double jump can take you. This really gave me confidence on how good the game can turn out to be. The fact that you can turn a seemingly defensive item to attack, and in this case win the match. A system that I really liked, and that further drives the aggressive style of gameplay they built, is that you can sacrifice your shield to shoot an electrical bullet to stun players, but also electrify these gold connected pieces on the map, so if you see someone planning on walking on some of those, you can get a safe way to get in and deal some big damage. Tying in with the game aesthetic of a televised event, depending on how you play, you gather likes which fill up a bar that gives you buffs, making the end of the game even more frantic, as the damage that the remaining players can deal to each other is even more dangerous comparing to the beginning. This also helps against players camping out of fights until the end, as the players that engage into battles will most likely be stronger than those who took the coward route. This open beta kept things simple in terms of the weapons you got to use: machetes, katanas, hammers, fists and buzzsaws, all of them being closely similar to the selection on Let It Die, with the Serbia loading to the rest old and new. I do wonder how they can make ranged weapons work, as one of the hunters in the trailers used one, so I'm definitely interested to see how that turns out. Not only that, but each variation of the weapon has different skills, so there's definitely a lot of possibilities. Case in point, I obviously went with the katana as soon as I could and didn't even look at the buzzsaws, as I would prefer something more like a normal chainsaw, but then I tried it out and fuck yeah, weapon surfing! In terms of equipment, it's unfortunate that it's all a single outfit. I did like the makeshift nature of the clothes in Let It Die. I was looking forward to some mix and matching in terms of clothes. But this is something that largely depends on how big the selection is when the game releases, just so you don't see too many players using the same stuff. You can also change the skins for the weapons and the shield, which I think already looks cool, but more choice is also good too. Also emotes, you can buy different ones to really dunk on your enemies, so you can even show how you want to make free! Same with the character creator. We'll assume that you can customize your character, but for the beta there was only 10 presets to choose from. While not to my liking, show that they nailed the art style for the character models, which they tread between realistic and cartoony, with a good balance between, confirming that Japan is still based in that regard. If there is one bad thing in terms of customization, it's the personal room. I get it, it's just a simple diorama to have in the background while you go through the menus, but I was expecting to be able to walk around in it and interact with stuff. Either way, you will be able to also buy stuff for the room, but unlike Let It Die, where the players would invade your base and could see how you decorated your space, in Deathverse I don't think it will ever be worth spending currency for something so trivial. In the end, I do worry for the longevity of the game. Free-to-play games come and go, and Let It Die had its systems created so that even if other players weren't actively participating, the main game wouldn't lose much from it, as it could easily be a single-player experience, if not for the constant checks on their servers, which will unfortunately marks the game to be forgotten once its servers go down. With Deathverse, it's all competitive multiplayer, at least for now. I can see them putting the AI from the cryptids and the hunters to good use and creating a different mode where it's players against the environment, so if there isn't a good content flow to keep players interested after it launches, it will sadly die soon. My final thoughts and something they should work before and after releasing. More weapons? Not saying anything they aren't doing already. A fix to the slippery running physics, as the drift you can get going while running away from something is fucking ridiculous. Make the room something more substantial. Cut down on the getting into a match, maybe when you die you can instantly go into the matchmaking instead of being forced out. Different shapes for the maps, maybe less hexagons but bigger ones. And I hope that the real money cash shop isn't too aggressive. If it's all cosmetics, I think it's fine. I'll probably do another video sometime after the game releases, to see how the game turned out to be. But until then, I'll see you all later.